Blur!
Lin Yi doubles over, his face flushing a sick shade of green as he dry heaves into the dirt. The realization is like a physical blow. Every meal he's had in this city suddenly feels like lead in his stomach, a poisonous reminder of the meat they all consumed without question. He looks as if he wants to tear his own gut open just to purge the memory of those flavors. Chu Yun is just as shaken. She presses a trembling hand over her mouth, her eyes wide and glassy with unshed tears and pure, gut-wrenching revulsion. Seeing his sister on the verge of a breakdown, Chu Kai snaps. He rams his elbow into Lin Yi's ribs, a silent, violent command for him to shut his mouth. Lin Yi stumbles back, realizing too late that his clinical detachment has a breaking point for those who haven't died 1,000 times yet.
Sorry, I didn't mean it like that. It's just a theory, a dark one. Maybe the basement wasn't a slaughterhouse for food. Maybe it was just industrial waste management. Think of it like recycling. Grinding remains into fertilizer for their farms, or using the bone meal for construction. It doesn't have to be a menu.
Chu Kai's jaw sets so hard his teeth might crack. He looks like he's ready to smash the drone and Lin Yi's face in one go. Lin Yi's attempt at an improvement has only made the mental imagery more horrifying. Industrial-scale human recycling isn't exactly a comfort.
For the love of just stop talking, Lin Yi!
Lin Yi gasps for air, wiping a string of bile from his lip. He looks physically exhausted by the mental strain.
Some things are better left unsaid. If you want us to keep working together, don't ever mention fertilizer again.
Lin Yi offers a weak, apologetic smile. He knows he's crossed a line. He needs to move the conversation back to the mission. He looks up at the hovering drone, his expression turning serious.
Anyway, tell us more about what you saw. What happened to that girl? How did you confirm she was gone?
I found her hair clip, right there by the edge of that bottomless pit. It was just lying in the grime.
Zhang Cheng's voice crackles, a rare moment of genuine emotion bleeding through the drone's clinical output.
She loved that thing more than anything. She used to tell me that as soon as her hair grew back after the treatment, she'd wear it every single day. She never got the chance.
Lin Yi catches that brief flicker of vulnerability in Zhang Cheng's words. He decides not to pry. Some wounds are still too fresh, even years later. He shifts the topic to something more tactical.
Survival like yours isn't luck. How did you do it? How did you stay under their radar for so long without them realizing what you knew?
Chu Kai had his own path. His desperate need to protect Chu Yun and the sudden awakening of his powers gave him a fighting chance at concealment. But Zhang Cheng, he's as ordinary as they come. No powers, no supernatural senses. Chu Kai hadn't detected a single spark of ability in him. To live as a conscious human in a city where every person you meet is a predator waiting for you to sleep, that takes more than just skill. It takes a specific kind of genius.
The moment I scrambled out of that hellhole, I didn't think twice. I ran straight for my parents. In my head, I just needed them to call the police, to bring the sirens and the lights. That basement, it was undeniable. There were bodies, machines, blood everywhere. I thought there was no way anyone, monster or not, could scrub a crime scene that massive before the authorities arrived.
Zhang Cheng was just a boy back then. The sheer mental fortitude it took to witness such a nightmare and keep his head is nothing short of incredible. Small and terrified, he was lost in a world that had suddenly turned grotesque. Like any child, his first instinct was to seek shelter in the only people he believed could protect him, his mother and father. But once he was back in the sterile, echoing silence of the hospital ward, the image of that girl's parents wouldn't leave him. Something about their grief, or lack of it, left a bitter taste in his mouth. She'd never officially left. No discharge papers, no goodbye. Yet her family was nowhere to be seen. It was as if she'd simply been erased from their lives, and they were perfectly fine with it. The dissonance was too loud to ignore. Zhang Cheng kept his mouth shut around his own parents. He knew instinctively that if he spoke, the window of truth would slam shut forever. He began to watch, to prowl, to investigate. It didn't take long for the pattern to emerge. Others in the oncology ward were following her. One day they were there, fighting for their lives. The next, their beds were stripped and empty. The disappearances always happened in the dead of night, shielded by the shadows and the mechanical hum of the building. And every time, the relatives acted as if nothing was wrong, or worse, as if the person had never existed. Cold suspicion began to take root in his heart. He looked at every doctor, every nurse, every grieving parent, and saw only a mask. He started questioning every smile, every polite word, and every shadow. That was the moment the child died, and the meticulous observer was born. He learned to count every heartbeat and watch every flickering light, searching for the crack in the facade. The hospital was only the beginning. Once his eyes were open, Zhang Cheng began to see the same hollow patterns everywhere in his life. The world was full of gaps where people used to be. Empty desks at school that the teacher never commented on. Front doors that remained locked for weeks, with neighbors who simply forgot who lived there. A few would return, acting strange and distant as if they'd been hollowed out and refilled with something else. But most just slipped into the darkness and were never seen again. The most terrifying part wasn't the vanishing itself. It was the collective amnesia of the survivors. It was as if a cosmic eraser had wiped those names from existence, leaving only a chilling, polite silence where their lives had once been.
That's when the truth finally sunk in. None of it was right. None of them were human, not in the way I understood the word.
Zhang Cheng's image on the drone screen flickers slightly, his digitized eyes fixed on an invisible horizon.
So, I did the only logical thing. I became a ghost before they could make me one. I shut the world out and made my own reality within 4 walls. Being alone was my only weapon. I used that silence to tear through books, looking for a way to explain the rot I saw in the world. I thought if I knew enough, I'd find the exit. The more I learned, the higher my scores went. But the atmosphere in that apartment was suffocating. My parents, the things I lived with, they started looking at me differently. It wasn't pride, it was something else. Every time I brought home an award, they'd go quiet. They didn't even try to fake being happy. I could see the resentment boiling behind their eyes. They were genuinely miserable because of my success.
Lin Yi doesn't even blink. He's seen this pattern before in his own life, a dark mirror of the same horrific truth. The logic of the freaks is as simple as it is cruel. To them, a child with potential is just high-quality livestock, and high-quality products don't stay in the local grocery store. They're sent away for the elite to consume. They'd spent years raising him, only to realize his excellence meant he'd be taken from them and served on someone else's table. They weren't just angry, they felt cheated out of a prime cut. Lin Yi's voice remains level as he explains this to Zhang Cheng. There's a short silence, and then a dry, bitter laugh rings out from the drone.
So that was it. That's why they were so pushy about that recommendation for the top university. They were practically begging me to take it, acting like it was the chance of a lifetime. I knew their enthusiasm was a lie. Their smiles were too wide, their eyes too hungry. It was the most attention they'd paid to me in years, and it made my skin crawl. I fought them on it. I refused the fast track and insisted on taking the entrance exam myself. I thought I was making a stand for my own future. But now I see, they just couldn't wait to process me. They were just trying to ship their most valuable product before it spoiled.
Lin Yi gives a slow, heavy nod, the grim reality of Zhang Cheng's words settling over the group like a cold fog.
It's a harvest, Zhang Cheng. Once the ripe fruit is gone, they just plant more seeds. You were just a rotation in their crop.
But it doesn't make sense. If these freaks are everywhere, if they control the world, why the charade? Why play house with us for decades?
Zhang Cheng's digitized voice is thick with genuine confusion. For all his genius, the sheer inefficiency of the monster system baffles him.
Why not just cage us like real cattle? Why waste time with schools, exams, and parenting when they could just slaughter us at will?
We've been over this 1,000 times in every dark corner we've hidden in.
The group falls into a brief, heavy silence. They've spent weeks in the mountains dissecting the monster's motives, but the answer remains out of reach.
The truth is, we don't know. We're missing a piece of the puzzle, a fundamental rule of their world. But theorizing won't get us over the city walls. Right now, the only thing that matters is the exit. We can solve the why once we're alive and free.
The hope of finding answers lies beyond the city limits, out in the vast unknown world. They all think of the skeletal remains they found, the final message pointing toward a sanctuary in the frozen Great North. The atmosphere shifts as Zhang Cheng's digitized face takes on a look of insufferable smugness.
Admit it. That's the real reason you reached out to me, isn't it? You hit a wall and realized your little group needed a real brain to find the crack. A wise move. You realized that without a genius like me, your escape would just be a long walk to a shared grave.
Lin Yi can't help himself. He bristles at the arrogance, seizing the chance to knock the genius down a peg.
Genius? You are shut in with a drone, Zhang Cheng. Don't let the high-score trophy go to your head. Besides, Lin Yi said any high-quality human would do. You just happen to be the one on the other end of the line. Don't act like you're special.
Special enough to be high quality, apparently. Which is more than I can say for some gorilla I know.
Zhang Cheng's chuckle is taunting, his gaze and tone fixed squarely on Lin Yi.
Though, I suppose a talking gorilla is a rare enough specimen. Maybe they're keeping you around for the novelty.
You arrogant little tech cockroach. Say that to my face and see how special your jaw feels.
Lin Yi gnashes his teeth, his hands curling into fists. He's vibrating with the urge to reach through the drone and strangle someone. Zhang Cheng ignores the outburst, his expression turning cold and clinical once more.
Let's get back to reality. You came to me because you want a perfect escape plan. A plan that actually works.
And you're going to give it to us? From inside a locked bedroom? You can't even escape your own parents, much less a city full of monsters.
Lin Yi sneers, his skepticism a sharp contrast to Zhang Cheng's confidence.
If you're such a mastermind, why don't you walk out your front door first? Then maybe we'll listen.
If I really wanted to leave, those two freaks downstairs couldn't stop me. I'm staying because I'm not ready to move yet.
Lin Yi steps in before the argument can spiral further. He needs Zhang Cheng's cooperation, not another fight.
We already have a primary strategy. We've spent weeks refining it.
Lin Yi begins to outline the intricate details of their plan, the positioning, the timing, and the risks they're prepared to take. The drone goes silent. Zhang Cheng's digital avatar remains motionless for a long moment, processing the information.
An inside agent strategy. It's not the worst idea I've heard. It has a certain elegance to it, but...
A flicker of genuine doubt crosses Zhang Cheng's face, his tone shifting from mockery to a chilling, analytical weight.
If you actually go through with that plan, you're not going to reach the Great North. You're going to die. And you're going to fail. Miserably.
What makes you so sure that our strategy is going to fall apart?
Lin Yi took a large step toward the drone. He leaned in, glaring directly into the camera lens with his eyes burning with resentment. It was obvious that Zhang Cheng's dismissive attitude was starting to grate on his nerves.
You haven't even seen what a real freak looks like. On what grounds are you making such a bold claim?
On the grounds that I actually have a brain?
Zhang Cheng retorted, his voice sounding flat and bored through the speaker.
You!
Lin Yi began to snap back, but Lin Yi reached out a hand, stopping him before the argument could escalate. Lin Yi gave a small, warning shake of his head toward his companion. He then turned his attention back to the hovering machine, his voice calm and respectful.
Could you explain where we went wrong? What are we missing?
Plenty.
Zhang Cheng replied. There was a faint trace of self-satisfaction in his synthesized voice.
The core idea isn't bad. On paper, at least, it should work. But as they say, the devil is in the details, and you've missed several.
The details?
Lin Yi blinked, a look of genuine confusion crossing his face.
Giving up on the high-speed rail was a good first step. Choosing bus routes because they typically have fewer freaks, I'll give you credit for that logic. It's sound. However, ignoring the sheer scale of the operation is just a form of self-delusion. It's a way to make yourselves feel better without looking at the math. A single bus might have a handful of monsters, sure. But what if there are 2, 3, or even 10 of them rolling out at once?
At those words, Lin Yi felt a knot of cold realization tighten in his gut. The cracks in their plan were starting to show.
And then there's the issue of your timing.
Zhang Cheng pressed on.
You want to strike during the registration period for the universities, right? Because that's when students are expected to leave the city. In a normal world, that makes sense. But this isn't the normal world. You have to understand that in the eyes of the freaks, those students aren't people. They're cargo. High-value stock being moved to a processing center. During that specific window, the flow of cargo will be at its peak. Do you really think they'd only send out one bus at a time?
You're right. I didn't see it from that angle.
Lin Yi admitted. He felt a wave of frustration at his own short-sightedness. If the city's transport for livestock was coordinated in convoys, their plan to hijack a single lonely bus would put them right in the middle of a monster-infested fleet.
And here's the kicker. If they're moving something as valuable as an entire class of high-quality livestock, do you really think they'd leave it unguarded? Every shipment will have escorts, predators watching the herd to make sure every head arrives at the slaughterhouse intact. That is why your current plan is a guaranteed death sentence.
Lu Linhai let out a frustrated huff, his anger replaced by a begrudging acceptance of the logic being thrown at them.
Fine, you made your point. But if we don't go then, we have no way of knowing when the other buses are scheduled to leave the city. We'd be blind.
Chu Kai nodded slowly, his expression grim. He looked over at Lu Linhai before adding his own concern.
Even if we got the schedule, we wouldn't know the manifest. Not knowing who's on board would make a targeted rescue impossible.
If you hadn't found me, you'd be right. Solving that problem would be a nightmare for people with average intelligence.
Zhang Cheng said, his voice brimming with arrogance.
But since you did find me, those obstacles are effectively gone.
You have a solution already?
Lin Yi asked, his hope rekindled.
Of course, don't forget, the 2 monsters currently playing house with me are desperate to get me shipped out. If I tell them I want to head to the university early, just to get settled and experience campus life, they'll jump at the chance to speed up the process.
Lin Yi frowned, his mind racing through the variables.
What if they decide the high-speed rail is faster? Why would they agree to a bus?
You're missing the point again. To the freaks, it's about delivery, not the method. They don't care about the logistics of the trip, only that the cargo arrives. If I request a bus because I want to see the scenery, they won't object. They have no reason to. It's a trivial preference to them. I was able to take the college entrance exam because they were willing to humor me. This will be no different. And because we're moving ahead of the official start date, they won't be able to coordinate a mass transit. Sending too many students out early would look suspicious even to the most oblivious human in this city.
The monsters were obsessive about the quality of their harvest. To them, the flavor of the livestock was paramount. They would do anything to keep the cattle calm and content before the final delivery, ensuring that adrenaline and fear didn't spoil the taste of the meat. With Zhang Cheng's refinements integrated into the plan, the countdown finally reached 0. 3 days passed in a blur of preparation. Finally, the day of the escape operation arrived. The car sat idling on the gravel shoulder near the highway toll station. Inside the cabin, the tension was palpable. Lu Linhai's eyes moved restlessly, scanning the barren landscape through the passenger window.
Isn't it a bit too bold for us to just park here in the open?
Lu Linhai whispered, his voice low with worry.
Relax. Uncle N switched on the hazards. To any monster looking, we just look like another broken-down vehicle.
Chukai replied. He kept his eyes shut tight, his ears twitching as he focused on the sounds of the night.
We're still some distance from the highway entrance. The freaks over there won't bother investigating. Once we seize the bus, we'll hit the gas and clear the perimeter. If they try to pursue us once we're on the highway, Uncle Ann can handle them with his skills. And Lin Yi, move over. You're practically squashing Zhao Yun against the door.
Lin Yi grumbled under his breath but complied, shuffling as far toward his own door as the cramped cabin allowed. Suddenly, Chu Kai's eyes snapped open, his pupils pinpointing in the gloom. He had picked up a specific vibration in the air.
They're here. I count 18 individuals on the coach. 11 heartbeats are human, but the other 7 belong to the freaks.
Uncle Ann, is everything ready on your end?
Lin Yi asked from the front, glancing over his shoulder at the older man. And Chengdao gave a slow, deliberate nod. Without wasting a second, Lin Yi reached into his pack and retrieved the black surveillance drone. The device belonged to Zhang Cheng, with freaks patrolling the bus interior. This was the only way to signal for the operation to begin without alerting the predators. The drone's rotors spun up with a soft whine as it lifted into the night sky. A grainy, high-contrast video feed flickered to life on Lin Yi's handheld monitor.
Visual contact.
Lin Yi whispered. A set of glowing headlights appeared on the screen, illuminating the road as the bus approached.
Uncle Ann, go, now!
At the command, and Chengdao slammed the car into gear. The engine roared as he yanked the steering wheel, veering the vehicle directly into the path of the oncoming traffic. Meanwhile, inside the bus, Zhang Cheng sat among a group of terrified students who looked just as lost as he was pretending to be. He had spent the last few minutes engaging in forced small talk, learning that most of them had been pushed out the door by their own parents. The children had been fed lies about early campus tours and celebratory vacations, beautiful dreams meant to mask the reality of the slaughterhouse. Scattered among the students were individuals who looked like salarymen on routine business trips, their expressions blank and indifferent. Zhang Cheng couldn't tell for certain how many of these commuters were actually skin-wearing monsters hiding in plain sight. Despite the danger, a surge of adrenaline raced through him. This was the moment, his first real gamble against the creatures that had turned his world into a farm. He pressed his face toward the window, his gaze scanning the darkened sky with unwavering focus. When the familiar silhouette of the drone materialized in the air outside, he knew the countdown had reached its final seconds. Zhang Cheng's fingers tightened around the straps of the bag on his lap, his muscles coiled like a spring.
Gah! Personal safety! Look out!
Zhang Cheng screamed, his voice reaching a pitch of theatrical terror. His performance was amateurish and over-elaborate, but in the chaos of the moment, the subtlety didn't matter. He scrambled out of his seat and rushed toward the front of the bus, backpack clutched tightly to his chest.
Driver, did we hit something? What's going on? Is the engine dead? Are we going to crash?
The driver didn't even flinch. His face was a mask of cold indifference as he looked at the spiderweb of cracks spreading across the windshield.
Something hit the glass. Get back to your seat.
But look! It's going to shatter! We're all in danger!
Zhang Cheng continued to howl with synthetic panic, making as much noise as possible to draw everyone's attention.
Zhang Cheng, enough of this embarrassing display. Sit down this instant.
His father barked from several rows back. Zhang Cheng turned a deaf ear to the command. Positioned so that his body blocked the driver's view of his bag, he reached down and slowly pulled back the zipper. Right then, a pair of blinding headlights appeared on the road ahead, a car roaring against the flow of traffic, aiming directly for the bus's front bumper.
Stop! Watch out! A car is heading right for us! Hit the brakes!
The headlights of the oncoming car blared through the windshield, yet the bus driver's foot remained welded to the gas pedal. Sensing the impending collision, Zhang Cheng scrambled toward the front, panic etched across his face.
Driver, stop the bus right now! Do you want to get us all killed?
He shrieked the words with theatrical desperation. Stopping the vehicle was the core objective of his undercover mission. His frantic yells shattered the quiet. The passengers finally noticed the vehicle barreling toward them in the wrong lane, and terror erupted. Hit the brakes! Someone stop him! Outside, the oncoming car skidded to a violent halt. The doors flew open, and Lin Yi's squad spilled out onto the asphalt. The driver's gaze locked onto the towering figure of Cheng Dao. A glint of predatory malice flared in his unnatural eyes. His hands tightened around the steering wheel, muscles bracing to gun the engine and crush the interlopers. But Zhang Cheng was already in position. Ensuring the bus did not move an inch was step 2. He knew exactly what the driver was, a skin-wearing monster holding a steering wheel. If the bus accelerated into Lin Yi's barricade, the humans would be slaughtered. Backing off slightly to shield his actions from the crowd, he bumped heavily against the driver's seat. His hand deftly unzipped his backpack.
Hey, driver, sir. If reincarnation is real, try being a human next time.
He murmured the condemnation like a silent prayer. Instantly, 2 flashes of lethal metallic silver exploded outward from his open pack. They were Cheng Dao's infamous butcher blades, retrieved flawlessly via drone days in advance. The freak in the driver's seat never stood a chance. At point-blank range, its monstrous reflexes were entirely useless. Zhang Cheng watched the flawless execution, an electric thrill of morbid awe coursing through his veins. He had heard the terrifying legends of Cheng Dao's supernatural prowess, but seeing a freak instantly dispatched was profoundly shocking. The driver's corpse slumped over the console, perfectly concealed from the civilian cattle in the back. But the bloodshed wasn't invisible to everyone. The co-driver stiffened, sensing the sudden butchery, and rose from his adjacent seat. Zhang Cheng's pulse barely elevated, having survived the visceral hellscape of the Abyss Hospital. Confronting a single disguised monster felt almost mundane. Pivoting smoothly to face the crowded bus, he pointed wildly at the approaching executioner outside.
It's the mass murderer! That's Cheng Dao, the one from the news!
Igniting mass hysteria was task number 3. His acting was undeniably ham-fisted, but as the terrifying, blood-stained silhouette of the city's most infamous serial killer strode toward the bus, the passengers needed no further convincing. A woman near the window pressed herself against the glass, her voice shattering. "Oh my God, it really is him! He's coming this way! Are we all going to die? We're dead! Why did we have to run into a serial killer tonight of all nights? He's butchered over a dozen people! It's horrific! What do we do? What do we do? He's going to slaughter us all!"
Please remain calm, ladies and gentlemen.
The co-driver turned back to the trembling crowd, trying to mollify the herd.
He cannot breach the vehicle. As long as everyone stays firmly in their seats, you are perfectly safe.
Yeah, he's right! The doors are shut! Zhang Cheng listened to the murmurs. He couldn't tell if the voices blindly agreeing were genuinely terrified humans, or just more hidden freaks trying to keep the livestock penned in. Someone call the cops, now!
Zhang Cheng, come here at once! Get behind us!
The creatures wearing his parents' skin stood up from the rear of the bus, beckoning him closer. A cold, mocking sneer crossed his internal thoughts. He had finally engineered a way out of their clutches. There was absolutely no chance he was walking backward into the slaughterhouse. "Cannot breach the vehicle?" he mocked mentally. "Then I'll just roll out the red carpet." Executing his 4th objective, he slammed his hand against the pneumatic door controls.
The bus is a death trap. Everyone run for your lives.
What do you think you're doing? Get back here.
The co-driver spun around, lunging violently to snatch the escaping teenager. His hand clamped down, but a secondary streak of silver met him at the threshold. A bloodletting knife viciously stabbed toward his exposed throat. Before the creature could counter, and Cheng Dao crossed the threshold, stepping fully into the cabin. Brandishing a massive blackened bone cleaver, the butcher unleashed a brutal horizontal sweep aimed squarely at the monstrosity's neck. Another metallic shockwave rang through the aisle as the creature raised its augmented limbs to block the devastating blow. And Cheng Dao had anticipated the parry. Exactly as the block occurred, two slender boning knives shot upward from below, driving themselves deeply into both of the creature's kneecaps. Ah! Blood! He's murdering him! Over the chaotic screaming, a cold, commanding voice boomed into the cabin from the street outside.
What the hell are you idiots waiting for? Are you just going to sit there and let a serial killer slaughter you? Run! If you don't run right now, you're all dead.
With the doors sitting wide open and the legendary butcher carving people up in the aisle, the passenger's primary instinct took over. Lin Yi's psychological warfare was entirely intentional. He wasn't just maximizing the chaos, he was single-handedly saving their lives. The moment full-scale combat engaged, the monsters would inevitably shed their skins. If the ignorant civilians witnessed those true, grotesque forms and managed to escape, they would be marked for execution by the city's greater freak network. Lin Yi simply didn't have the time or resources to hunt them down and silence them afterward. By terrifying them into fleeing immediately, he ensured they remained ignorant, buying them a few extra days of life. Stampeding over the seats, the passengers surged out the back emergency exits, fleeing recklessly into the darkness while clutching their phones.
Uncle Ann, let's wrap this up fast before backup arrives.
The battlefield mathematics was grim. 7 total freaks initially boarded. 1 lay dead, another was permanently crippled over the wheel, leaving roughly 5 combatants. 3 of those entities were masquerading as the parents of other students. Driven by their biological mandate to cultivate their livestock, they had been forced to abandon the fight and chase down their fleeing children. Therefore, only 2.5 threats remained engaged, the crippled co-driver and the horrors posing as Zhang Cheng's family.
Miserable, filthy livestock, I'll tear you apart.
The co-driver's torso swelled obscenely. The human skin at his waist ruptured with a sickening tear as violently thrashing tentacles, lined with wicked reverse barbs, lashed out toward Cheng Dao. The butcher was prepared. Tucking his chin, he kicked hard against the dashboard and flawlessly backflipped out of the bus window, dodging the lethal strike.
Ah, Zhang Cheng! It appears you deduced our secret quite a while ago.
His parents slowly descended the rear stairs of the bus, their eyes fixed on him with unsettling, unblinking intensity. Their lips were curled into terrifyingly wide, frozen smiles.
Well, if the veil is lifted, you can hardly fault us for indulging early.
The lower half of his father's face abruptly unhinged and tore itself down the middle, exposing a hideous maw lined with circular, saw-like teeth.
Such exquisite quality. I have hungered for you for years.
His mother convulsed violently. Her neck snapped to an impossible angle as chunks of jet-black chitin chewed violently through the soft tissue of her throat.
Ugh, Jesus.
Zhang Cheng grimaced, his nose wrinkling against the foul stench.
You people are remarkably hideous. To think I lived beneath the same roof as these rotting abominations for a decade. I need a shower.
Stepping back to a safe distance, he jabbed a thumb forward and yelled at Cheng Dao.
I choose you, murderer uncle. Use slash.
And Cheng Dao scowled deeply, his annoyance with the teenager's antics radiating visibly. He shot a glare so dark it could have withered grass.
I will mulch the parents. You deal with the cripple.
Without another word, and Cheng Dao pivoted to face the parents. Every remaining bladed weapon erupted from the unzipped backpack, swirling around his shoulders in a devastating orbital vortex.
Wait, me?
He froze, his arrogant smirk melting instantly off his face. As the butcher surged forward to engage the parents in a flurry of silver, the heavily mutated co-driver dragged its mangled body down the front stairs of the bus. The embedded boning knives had shattered its ability to walk upright, but equipped with 4 supplementary insectoid legs extending from its flanks, it scuttled forward with horrifying efficiency. Its multifaceted eyes locked onto Zhang Cheng with a sickening click. It raised 2 massive, scythe-like forearms high into the air, ready to cleave him in 2.
Wait, Uncle Ann, tag in. Finish this one first.
He stumbled frantically backward. In the split second before the scythes descended, a dark figure suddenly darted out from the alleyway shadows.
Don't flatter yourself. When Uncle Ann said you, he meant us.
Gorilla?
Lin Yi hadn't mentioned their previous encounters with the freaks to Zhang Cheng. As far as the top scholar was concerned, Chengdao was the only muscle in the... To him, Lin Yi was just a half-baked strategist while Chu Kai served as the ears. Lu Linhai and Chu Yun, they were nothing more than excess baggage. But the violence erupting in front of him was starting to change that perception. As the monster's bladed forearm came crashing down, Lu Linhai lunged into the fray with a heavy piece of rebar. He swung the steel rod with both arms, putting every ounce of strength into a desperate parry. He shot a quick look at the scholarly boy. Even though he'd seen Zhang Cheng's face on a drone camera, this was the first time they were standing face to face. Behind his black-rimmed glasses, Zhang Cheng looked painfully frail. He was tall, but so thin that his clothes seemed to swallow him whole.
Listen here, Beanpole. Stay back and keep out of the way before you get yourself killed.
Lu Linhai couldn't help but smirk, relishing the moment he finally had the upper hand in terms of physical prowess. Zhang Cheng scowled beneath his mask, his internal monologue dripping with annoyance.
He acts just like a wild gorilla. What's there to be so smug about? A big pile of meat with muscles where his brain should be.
Despite his grumbling, Zhang Cheng knew he was dead weight in a physical brawl and retreated to a safer distance. The freak's rage was palpable. It hoisted both forearms high while the tentacles writhing from its belly lashed out toward Lu Linhai. But Lu Linhai knew these things by now. Their movements were no longer a mystery to him. He danced back to open up the gap. That's when Lin Yi, who had been lying in wait on the far side of the bus, struck. Knife in hand, Lin Yi blurred toward the monster's rear. He aimed for the vulnerable joint of an insectoid leg and drove the steel deep without a moment's pause. Lin Yi didn't bother retrieving his blade. He just left it buried in the beast's leg. In one fluid motion, he retreated like Lu Linhai and drew a fresh knife from his pack. This was no amateur hour. They had rehearsed every beat of this escape meticulously. Every daylight hour had been spent refining the plan with Zhang Cheng's analytical mind. Every night, they combed the area for supplies, with Chu Kai's lockpicking skills opening doors that were meant to stay shut. And then there was the training. And Chengdao had put them through hell, ensuring their weapons were honed and their hands were steady. These knives were lethal instruments in their hands.
Come on, you ugly bastard, over here!
Lin Yi spat, his voice laced with venom and defiance.
Weren't you monsters supposed to be better than us? Weren't you the ones in control? Come and prove it. If you can't put me down today, then you're even more pathetic than the livestock you claim we are.
Hey, freak, look this way. I've got a little surprise for you.
Chu Yun waved her arms frantically, shouting at the top of her lungs from a short distance away. The monster instinctively turned its head toward the new source of noise. In that split second of distraction, a sharp whistling sound cut through the air. Chu Kai lowered his weapon, shooting a smug glance at his sister.
Well, that was pretty slick, wasn't it? Admit it, your brother is a legend.
A guttural, agonizing scream of fury.
Lowly, filthy, livestock.
Shamed and mutilated, the freak lashed out in a mindless frenzy. Its abdominal tentacles whipped through the air like sentient razor wire. Lin Yi seized the opening. He circled around to the monster's unprotected rear and brought his rebar pipe down on its head with skull-shattering force. His job was to maintain the pressure, keeping the monster's focus divided while Lin Yi and Chu Kai looked for the kill. As the freak tried to turn its attention back to Lin Yi, Lin Yi launched himself at the creature once more. This time, the monster had learned. Even as its forearm swung toward Lin Yi, its belly tentacles coiled back to strike at the approaching Lin Yi.
Lin Yi, strike left, dodge right, now jump.
Chu Kai's voice cut through the chaos like a whip. Without hesitation, Lin Yi followed the instructions as if they were his own instinct. He twisted his body midair, narrowly avoiding the tentacle that tried to snag his chest from the left. He leaped high, clearing the secondary tentacles that swept across the ground to sweep his legs from under him. A third tentacle lunged for his throat, but before it could find its mark, a crossbow bolt pinned it to the earth. Lin Yi seized the moment. He landed right before the freak and drove his knife back into the vulnerable leg joint. Their teamwork was effortless. Whenever the monster tried to focus its malice on one of them, the others would immediately exploit the distraction. On the other side of the clearing, and Cheng Dao was making the slaughter look like child's play. He wasn't losing a single inch of ground, even against two of the monsters at once. And Cheng Dao's combat style was a symphony of raw carnage and surgical precision. His heavy cleaver rose and fell without mercy, a blur of dark steel amidst the chaos. But the cleaver was only half the threat. He used his supernatural control to guide a dozen other blades through the air, orchestrating a relentless storm of sneak attacks. Knives hissed through the air like vengeful spirits, severing the monster's tentacles and hacking through their chitinous, insectoid legs. Within 10 minutes, the three massive freaks were beaten back, crippled and bleeding under the sustained pressure of the survivors' assault. Zhang Cheng watched from the sidelines, his eyes wide behind his glasses. He was paralyzed by a mix of terror and profound awe at the efficiency of their teamwork.
Hey, Trash, take this! Little flying rod coming through.
Lin Yi bellowed.
Eat steel!
He shoved his rebar pipe forward with all his weight, aiming straight for the monster's unprotected abdomen. Chu Kai shifted his position in a blur, lining up a final shot from the front.
Go to hell.
He grit his teeth and drove his blade into the base of the freak's skull with every ounce of his remaining strength. On the far side of the road, and Cheng Dao had already finished his work. Two more mangled carcasses lay steaming on the asphalt as he turned to watch the others finish their kill. He didn't offer to help. Instead, he watched for just a heartbeat before turning away and walking toward the idling bus. The engine roared to life under his hands, the vibrations rattling the frame of the old vehicle. Lin Yi and the others gathered their breath and scrambled toward the open doors just as the fight drew to a bloody close.
Get on. We're moving.
With everyone secured inside, and Cheng Dao slammed the bus into gear and floored the pedal, racing toward the looming highway entrance. Lin Yi's heart hammered against his ribs like a trapped bird as the toll booths drew closer. The staff at the station finally realized the bus wasn't stopping. When they saw Cheng Dao's face at the wheel, their human masks dissolved, revealing the predatory monsters beneath. They rushed out to block the concrete lane.
Brace yourselves.
And Cheng Dao shouted over the roar of the engine as he stood on the accelerator. The vehicle smashed through the metal barrier of the toll station. But just as they cleared the gate, a lone freak leaped from the roadside and clung to the side of the bus. It raised a bladed forearm and shattered the window, glass raining down on the terrified passengers within. As the creature tried to pull its bulk through the jagged opening, Zhang Cheng lunged for his bag and pulled out a tightly wrapped glass bottle.
Back off! Let me deal with this.
He tore away the protective wrapping and hurled the bottle at the freak's face with everything he had.
Damn it! I was aiming for the eyes! My aim is garbage.
Wait, is that sulfuric acid? Zhang Cheng, where the hell did you get that?
I borrowed it from the chemistry lab back when I was still going to class. I was saving it for the things at my house, but since I met you guys, well, better used here than buried.
Despite the agony of the chemical burns, the freak refused to let go, its claws digging into the metal frame as it tried to force its way inside. Lin Yi didn't give it a second chance. He raised his rebar and jabbed it straight into the corroded, sizzling wound on the monster's head.
Get the hell off my ride!
With a final heave, Lin Yi kicked the dying creature's corpse out of the shattered window. It hit the moving road and vanished into the dust. The moment the bus crossed onto the main highway, the world seemed to ripple. It felt as if they had passed through a thin, invisible veil. A wave of nausea and disorientation washed over Lin Yi. When his vision finally cleared, the world outside the windows had transformed. The vibrant greenery was gone, replaced by a landscape of nightmares. The trees flanking the road were gnarled and twisted into grotesque, bone-like shapes. Their leaves weren't leaves at all, but clusters of long, sharp needles that looked more like porcupine quills. The air itself felt heavy and dry, a suffocating heat that made it hard to draw a full breath.
Is this it? The world outside?
Lin Yi was shaken to his core. The alien landscape was so jarringly different from the city he had known that it left him momentarily breathless. He turned back to look at the city they had just fled, but his eyes found only a void. The urban sprawl was gone, replaced by a wall of shimmering heat and empty sky. The defense system was absolute. From out here, the entire city was an invisible ghost, sealed away behind a barrier of perfect illusion.
What the hell happened to the world?
He whispered, the magnitude of the truth hitting him like a physical blow. Lin Yi's voice suddenly broke through his shock, filled with a new kind of urgency.
Guys, look over there! Fast!
The highway was flanked by deep, dense woods on both sides, with gnarled trees that looked like they had been twisted by a malevolent hand. Upon the gnarled branches, a flock of grotesquely shaped creatures perched in eerie silence. Their ebony feathers were tattered and moth-eaten. Beneath the decay, their chests were a mess of rotting flesh, where crimson meat sprouts writhed with a life of their own. The entire flock turned their heads in a chilling, synchronized motion, their cold eyes tracking the bus as it sped down the road. They stayed their ground, watching us pass with an unblinking, predatory focus.
What on earth are those things?
Lin Yi leaned against the glass, his brow furrowed in disgust. The grotesque creatures were somehow even more repulsive than the horrors they had left behind in the city.
They look like crows.
Lin Yi felt a cold lump of unease forming in his stomach. The twisted plants and those wretched birds were a stark reminder that the entire world had been fundamentally altered by some unseen tragedy.
You're telling me those monsters are crows?
The color and the shrieks match? Yeah, they're crows all right.
Zhang Cheng watched the birds recede into the distance. Since they weren't attacking, he turned his attention back to the more immediate problem.
So where exactly is this great north you mentioned?
The North Pole? That's going to be a long trip if we're actually going that far.
I don't know for sure. Our information is limited. We might just have to keep driving north and hope we find it. But I don't think we should just go blindly. Let's aim for the next city first. Maybe we'll find some better clues there. And if we don't, well, we'll cross that bridge when we get to it.
The bus rumbled down the desolate highway, the silence inside as heavy as the atmosphere outside. Not a single other vehicle appeared on the empty stretch of road. 4 hours of monotonous driving passed before Chukai suddenly bolted upright in his seat, his eyes wide with alarm.
There's movement ahead.
The entire group stiffened instantly, falling into a practiced silence as they reached for their weapons.
Are the freaks waiting for us? How could they have gotten in front so fast?
No, they're human. About 30 of them, hiding in the woods on both sides of the road.
Lin Yi's eyes widened. After so long in a world dominated by skin-wearing monsters, the idea of encountering such a large group of humans felt almost like a dream. And Cheng Dao wrestled with the steering wheel, his knuckles white with strain as he pumped the brakes and adjusted their course. He brought the heavy vehicle to a halt just inches from the rusted guardrail.
They're armed. Those were gunshots.
Panic flared in the cramped cabin. They had tried to scavenge firearms before escaping the city, but the farm environment was strictly controlled. Aside from a single crossbow, they were defenseless against ranged weapons.
Why the hell are they shooting at us if they're human?
Lin Yi's mind raced as he watched the tree line. Then, a horrifying possibility took root in his thoughts.
The bus. They think this is a monster transport. They're hunting freaks, and we're looking like the cargo.
It was a logical and terrifying conclusion. Without someone like Chukai to sense the difference, any group of survivors would assume a city bus was carrying monsters or livestock.
Stop. We're human. We're survivors from the city. Don't shoot.
Figures began to peel away from the shadows of the trees, their weapons raised as they slowly circled the disabled bus.
Is that a hunting shotgun? It looks like a 3-shot semi-automatic 16-gauge.
Zhang Cheng squinted at the approaching men. Only the leader carried a firearm. The others were armed with axes, knives, and rusted blades. It seemed modern weapons were just as rare out here as they were behind the city's walls.
Everyone out of the bus! Now! Get your asses out here where I can see them!
What do we do, Lin Yi?
Stay inside. We don't know who these people are. If they're hostile, we're sitting ducks the moment we step off the stairs.
He's right. We need to talk them down first. But if they don't listen, Uncle Ann, can this thing still move?
The tire's shredded to hell, but the rim will hold for a few miles. I can force it through if we need to make a break for it.
Lin Yi stepped toward the window, steeling himself. He was the only one who could afford a mistake. If he was shot, he would simply reset the loop.
Listen to me. We just escaped from the city. We aren't your enemies. We're human survivors just like you.
I said get out! Move it right now, or I'm gonna start blasting into these windows!
The gunman leveled his shotgun at Lin Yi's face, his finger visibly twitching on the trigger. There was no reasoning with a man this far gone into paranoia. Lin Yi prepared to signal and Cheng Dao to floor it, but a sudden movement in the crowd caught his eye, stopping him cold. A younger man scrambled to the front, staring into the bus with wide, disbelieving eyes.
Wait! Lin Yi! Is that really you? Do you remember me?
Lin Yi froze, his heart skipping a beat. The voice was hauntingly familiar, pulling a buried memory from the depths of his mind like a ghost from the past.